Hello and welcome to Hobart International Airport, and after a weekend of driving around Hobart, I'm heading back to Sydney with Qantas Link in a Boeing 717-200, which hopefully won't be subbed to a Jetstar A320 like I did 2 days ago. So let's head inside and check in. Here we are in a very quiet terminal where I take a right and wander down to the Qantas section at the far end. Even though it was eerily quiet in here, the good news was that the departure hall was full of people and I must have just arrived during a quiet period. I was able to skip the non-existent queue by using my gold status to use the priority lane where it was offered a free exit row seat. I declined the offer as I had specifically selected my seat so that I could film inside the engines because that's what I'm interested in. After dropping off my bags, I was off through security and then into the departure hall. Now, only a few days ago, Qantas opened up the lounge at Hobart, which was perfect timing. It's a shared Qantas club and a business class lounge open to members, gold, platinum and above, and those with equivalent status within the One World Alliance. It's a fairly basic lounge, although it provides a reasonably quiet place to sit and wait, while providing a pretty cool view for this little av geek. Here's a quick rundown of the available food and drinks, which is essentially the same as at any other Qantas club around Australia, minus the barista, so you have to make do with a coffee machine. I grabbed an espresso, which I've been told is definitely not pronounced espresso, like I did in a previous video, and sat down to wait for my aircraft. Now here's our ride for this afternoon's flight. A Qantas Link Boeing 717-200, which, interestingly, was a pretty unpopular aircraft when they were launched but has since gone on to become a popular and safe workhorse after production finished. The twin-engined single-aisle jetliner was actually designed by McDonnell Douglas as the MD-95 for the approximately 100-seat segment, but before it was launched, Boeing purchased the company and it was christened the 717. 156 of them were built before production ended in 2006. Since then, the second-hand market for them has gone gangbusters, with both Delta and Qantas buying old ones, having not been interested in the aircraft when it was actually still being built. Even now, as these aircraft are aging, both airlines aren't looking at retiring them anytime soon. Now, what's particularly interesting, especially in Australia where most domestic jets are A320s and 737s, is that the engines are at the tail of the aircraft. This allows the whole aircraft to sit lower as they don't need to allow for space under the wing. This has advantages of smaller landing gears, and also they have easier access, especially at regional airports without aerobridges. For comparison's sake, see how high this A320 Airbus sits off the ground, as you can see in this footage now. Boarding was called and I took off to the gate. Remote gates are always fun as you get to hear and smell everything aviation, although I was probably really lucky to have got such clear weather, as it was windy, rainy and around 8 degrees the previous day. Inside, you start with 3 rows of business class in a 2-2 layout. Then you move on to economy, which is in a 3-2 layout. I'd usually go for a seat on the twin aisle side, although I was keen to film from my seat and knew that the sun would have been overpowering on that side, so I went on the other side. Now here's my seat, well back towards the rear of the aircraft, 18F. We'll have a look through my seat, which as I said is a part of the 3 seats on the right hand side, beginning with the individual overhead air vents. Now Nelson Mandela apparently said that these were the greatest advance in aviation, so there you go. There's the usual tray table, although this strut partially obstructs your legroom, so that might be an issue if you're on the larger side. And finishing off with this view out of the window of the wing and engine. Boarding was complete and we were pushed back to prepare for takeoff. So these turbofans you can see now were co-developed by BMW and Rolls-Royce and used in a whole range of aircraft. In fact, they were put forward as an option with the B-52 Stratofortress re-engineering project, although I think they've selected other engines now, but it just goes to show how versatile they are. Now in the distance now is a particularly rare sight, a Qantas Boeing 737-300 freighter. Now this started life as a standard passenger jet before being converted to a freighter-only version in 2006. And just before we take off, here's also a rare sight in Hobart, a Qantas Boeing 787-9 which has just returned from a repatriation flight from India, bringing Aussies home before Christmas. We eventually reached the end of the runway and took off towards the north. We took a slight right and flew up Tasmania's east coast. This was my first proper visit to Tasmania and I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially the Cradle Mountain National Park, which has surprisingly fantastic roads, especially in a rental Hyundai i30. Now while my AvGeek knowledge isn't bad, my geography was always lacking during school, so Wikipedia has helped me out quite a bit for what's coming up. Tasmania is the 26th largest island in the world and is named after the first European explorer who settled there, Mr. Tasmania, I think, who bought some convicts from Britain and built an apple plantation. And that's about all I know, but as you can see through the clouds, it's a pretty epic looking place, and if you're into rugged natural scenery, then this is somewhere that you definitely need to add to your bucket list. My only regret was that I was only there for a weekend, but I'll be sure to visit again soon. We reached our cruising altitude of 36,000 feet just before we passed the northern coastline to cross Bass Strait. This body of water, named after Mr. John Strait, links Tasmania and mainland Australia and is known for being particularly rugged. As well as King Island on the western side of it, it includes Flinders Island, which you can see now. While the flying was perfectly smooth at 36,000 feet, you can see how choppy the water was below. A complimentary hot or cold drink as well as an apple, raspberry and coconut slice were offered, and they tasted great, although it's not much of a lunch which you might have expected for a midday flight. While masks aren't mandatory, they were strongly encouraged and fairly much everyone on board was wearing one. While they are annoying and fog up your glasses, they are well worth the inconvenience considering the Aussie state borders are now able to open up while much of the rest of the world is actually going back down into lockdown. Particularly seeing how tough it has been for Victorians in recent months, I think we owe it to them all to do everything we can to keep this virus suppressed until the vaccine is up and running. We crossed the Victorian coastline and continued north before eventually starting our descent down into Sydney. The camera doesn't show it that well, although it was really nice to see Victoria and southern New South Wales a nice shade of green, especially after the fires around 12 months ago and now COVID. Just under 8,000 feet, we crossed the coastline again, just north of Wollongong, before taking a left and lining up to land in Sydney. It was a beautiful day in Sydney with near perfect flying conditions, which made for great views as we landed into Sydney. So, how was the flight? I really enjoyed it, although it was a pity to leave Tasmania only after a short trip. The 717 is a cool aircraft, and while it's probably a little noisy towards the rear of the aircraft, I don't personally mind the sound. It's a sturdy plane, and in fact it has the honour of never having a hull loss or loss of life, which isn't bad for an aircraft of that age. The crew were fine, and it was great to see the airport buzzing with activity and hopefully a sign of things to come. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and comment. It really helps the video and encourages YouTube to display the video to others who may be interested. I'd also love it for you to check out my channel where I have many more aviation geek videos from flights around Australia and around the world. As you may have seen during the meal service, Qantas are celebrating their 100th birthday this year, and later this month I'm off to the Qantas Founders Museum in Longreach to film some more videos, so make sure you're subscribed and click the notification bell so that you find out when I release the new videos. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook where you can follow along the journey with me. And finally, there's a great sight as we pull into the domestic terminal, a Qantas 787-9 Dreamliner in the Indigenous Art livery. While most of the long-haul fleet is in storage, there's a few 787s remaining in active service, flying repatriation flights, and flights between domestic cities such as this one off to Perth, so it's well worth keeping an eye out for them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you another time.